Hi, my name is Roxanne, and welcome to the first part of the lecture on brain-based learning. Any idea what kind or what type of learning this is? Well, before diving to that area, we will first know some basic information about the brain. Here are the list of things that we are going to tackle in the whole of this lecture, in part 1, in part 2. First, we'll have a background on the brain, which we're going to have in this first lecture. And then on the second part, we're going to talk about what brain-based learning is, its principles, and strategies. After that, after those things, will be the conclusion. So in this lecture, you will be able to learn about the different parts of the brain and their functions. In addition to that, we will be looking at brain development as well. And so, here are the topics we need to tackle in this lecture on the brain. We're going to talk about the brain, hemispheres, okay, the two hemispheres, the lobes, and then cognitive development. All set? Let's get started then. Say, how much do you know about the brain? Would you consider yourself an expert or a novice when it comes to matters related to the brain? Hmm? Well, I would like us then to have a short pop quiz before we jump to our lecture. Though I cannot see you right now, I hope you would answer the questions with me. I will give you 5 seconds for each question. Don't worry, just a few items of questions, and also you'll be given choices. Ready then? Let's start. Question 1, as you can read there, this body system controls everything you do or everything we do. Body system, I hope you know that. We have like the digestive system. What else? You have your first choice, nervous system. B, olfactory system. C, respiratory system. And D, endocrine system. Which of these controls everything that our body do? 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, the answer is A, the nervous system. Do you know about the system in our body? Well, the nervous system coordinates actions and sensory information by transmitting signals to and from different parts of the body. Okay, so again, the nervous system coordinates actions and sensory information by transmitting signals to and from different parts of the body. Okay, the next question. Okay, question 2. The nervous system is made up of these 3 parts. All right, which one do you think? A, brain, heart, and spinal cord. Oops, I hope you're familiar with those terms. But if not, I will show you later. B, brain, spinal cord, and nerves. C, nerves, arteries, and veins. D, nerves, liver, and heart. All right, let's see. The answer is letter B. Our nervous system is made up of the brain, the spinal cord, and nerves. Lots and lots of nerves that run in every part of our body. Anyway, do you know what spinal cord is? Okay, well, for those who do not know, here you go. So it is a bone located on our back. It's very long, okay, which connects our brain with the rest of the body. Okay, it's a bone on our back, as you can see on the image, which connects our brain to the rest of our body. And mind you, without this, we cannot move. Okay, next question. Question 3. What can you not do without the nervous system? What can you not do without the nervous system? A. Walk. B. Breathe. C. Think. Or D. All of the choices A, B, and C. Again, what can you not do without the nervous system? A. Walk. B. Breathe. C. Think. Or D. All of the above. The answer is letter T. All of the given choices. Okay, as I mentioned earlier in the spinal cord, right? In the spinal cord is a part of our nervous system. And I mentioned we cannot do anything, cannot move without that spinal cord. That means without a nervous system, we cannot do anything of those other choices. Breathe, walk, and think. We cannot walk, cannot breathe, and cannot think without the nervous system. You know why, right? It's because all of these functions are dictated by both the brain and spinal cord, as we've known earlier. I'm repeating myself. Okay, the nervous system, meaning the brain and the spinal cord, control all of our movement and response to senses. Right? Well, we're done with 4 questions. How are your scores so far? Let's continue. Next question. Which part of the body is the control center for the nervous system? Which part of the body is the control center for the nervous system? A, is it the spinal cord? B, is it the stomach? C, is it the brain? Or D, is it the heart? Spinal cord, stomach, brain, or the heart? Control center of the nervous system. Well, the control center of the nervous system is the brain. The brain processes all information coming from the other parts of the system. And without the brain, the system cannot function. Right? You've heard about medical situations where a patient or a person is declared brain dead. So if you say brain dead, then that person is in vegetative state, cannot really move, just bedridden. So there, we see the importance of the brain. Question 5 now. Where do our emotions come from? Where do our emotions come from? From the heart? That's choice letter D. But we also have choice A, cerebellum. B, medulla oblongata. C, amygdala. Why do I feel like a lot of you will get this wrongly? But let's see. Okay, so our emotions come from which of these parts of our body? Cerebellum, medulla oblongata, amygdala, or the heart? The answer is it the heart? Oh no, it's the amygdala. Have you heard about this part before? amygdala. How about cerebellum and medulla oblongata? All right, so to clear things up, let's take a look at them before continuing with our quiz. So first is the amygdala. You can see the image here. Okay, anyway, we have two of these on both hemispheres of our brain. We have the left and the right hemisphere, right? And with those, we also have one amygdala in each hemisphere. So we have two. They're very tiny, as you can see in the image, but it is where our emotions are given meaning. That means it is interpreted there. So is it fear? Is it happiness? Okay, all right. After giving meaning, it's remembered and made into an emotional memory. So the role of this tiny part in our brain is very crucial. That's the amygdala. Lastly, okay, we have the medulla oblongata. We'll talk about the cerebellum later in the latter part of our lecture. So the medulla oblongata, or simply you just call it medulla, it is a part of the brain stem. The brain stem, okay, and as you can see in the image here, and it is responsible for autonomic, okay, autonomic movement. Autonomic means involuntary or movements which we cannot control, like, say, sneezing or our heartbeat. We cannot control, right? We cannot just tell our heart to stop beating. So those are examples of autonomic or involuntary movement which the medulla controls. All right, I hope amygdala and medulla oblongata are clear to you. All right, next question. How heavy do you think is a typical brain, an average brain? How heavy? A, is it 3 pounds? B, 3 ounces? C, 3 tons? That's really, really, really heavy, 3 tons. Or D, 3 kilograms? 3 pounds, 3 ounces, 3 tons, or 3 kilograms? How heavy do you think a typical brain is? An average brain weighs 3 pounds. It's the first choice, letter A. 3 pounds or 1.4 kilograms. Were you right? So an average human brain usually weighs a little more than 1 kilogram. Cool. Right, so 2% of our overall weight, 1.4 kilograms. Okay, our last question. This is the last question, question number 7. How much energy from the body does the brain consume? How much energy from the body does our brain consume? Is it A, 2%, B, 10%, C, 20%, or D, 50%? That's half of our energy. 2, 10, 20, or 50%? The brain uses 20% of our body's energy. 20%. The other 80% is used by the rest of our body. That's quite big, right? For a part of our body. No wonder studying makes us hungry. That reminds us to eat properly so our brain can get its needed energy. All right. Well, how well did you do in our quiz? This is actually a kid's quiz. All right, so to add more excitement to the quiz, let's know some fun facts about the brain. So, do you know that the brain grows 3 times its size a year after birth? Huh. And actually, it continues to grow until we're about 18 years old. Wow. So our first year, 1 year after being born, our brain grows 3 times. Huh, 3 times. And then it continues growing until we're 18. Okay. However, it also gets smaller as we grow older. It happens sometime after middle age, so don't worry. Middle age, that would mean over 50s, 50s and older. Right. That means we need to continue stimulating our brain as we grow older. Mhm. Okay. And do you also know that our brain is made up of 75% water? 75% water. That's 3/4 of the brain. That's why it's important to stay hydrated. All right? It's important to stay hydrated so we can maintain a proper functioning brain. Okay. Another interesting fact is that the brain cannot physically feel pain. Well, it can process sense of pain, but it cannot feel pain on its own. Mhm. That's why there are some medical instances or situations wherein some people get some metal stuck in their brain, but they haven't felt pain. That's why it took years for it to be found out. Mhm. Well, that's interesting for me. Yes, and a valuable lesson as well. Last interesting fact is that dreams or dreaming is understood to be an outcome of combined thoughts, emotional, and mental factors, and that proves that the brain is working even though we are asleep. So that's why we dream. Okay, there you go on the additional information about the brain. I hope the quiz and the facts were enough to gain your interest for the lesson today. Right, so moving on to our lecture proper. How can we define brain? All right, so here is a simple definition. Read with me. So it controls all functions of the body. It also interprets information from the outside world using the senses. Now, we had already mentioned that earlier in our quiz, right? That the brain is the main control center of the nervous system. Okay, so all functions of the body is being controlled by the brain. And it interprets all senses, okay, all senses from our body. In addition, intelligence, creativity, and emotion and memory are a few of the many things directed by the brain. Okay, I think that's enough to define brain. So for our next topics, we will be we're talking about the main parts of the brain. However, we will not go deep. Okay, we'll not go too deep on those things. We just need enough to give us an idea about the different functions of the brain parts. Okay, so let's get to know more about the brain then. Right, so I think we already know that There are two hemispheres of the brain. We have the left and the right hemispheres. What do you know about these parts of the brain though? What does the left hemisphere do and what does the right hemisphere do? Okay, do you know that the left side of the brain or the left hemisphere is responsible for controlling the right side of the body? Again, do you know that the left hemisphere controls the right side of our body? Nope. Now you know. It's another mystery, right? Okay, I hope you will read more on that one if you're interested. So anyway, here are the functions of the left hemisphere. Okay, analysis, logic, facts, sequencing, mathematics, and language. It seems the brain does more of complex or higher order thinking things. Okay, here are its functions. On the other hand, okay, if the left hemisphere controls the right side of our body, the right hemisphere, this part, coordinates the left side of the body. And it performs tasks that have to do with creativity and the arts. Aside from that, it also manages our, intuition. Intuition meaning our sixth sense or gut feeling. Also feelings or emotions, imagination, and daydreaming. Can you see the differences on their functions? Okay. However, even if the two different hemisphere of our brain functions on those things, bear in mind that everyone has different cognitive strengths. For example, some people have exceptionally strong memory skills, while other people excel in logic and reasoning. The same can be said for cognitive weaknesses. All right? Remember that a person or a learner is more than just being a left brain or a right brain. Oh, and also, before we forget about this special part, there is a part that connects these two hemispheres. They are not totally separated, okay? So it is what we call a corpus callosum. As you can see in the image here. Okay, it is a large C-shaped nerve fiber bundle, C-shaped C fiber bundle. Okay, it stretches across the midline of the brain. Because of this bundle of nerves, function and information can be shared between the two hemispheres. Okay, so it's like a bridge. Okay, a bridge connecting the left and right hemisphere so they could share, they could communicate. Okay, right. So moving on, we will take a look at the four lobes of the brain next. Do you know the names of the four lobes of our brain? Okay, we have the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes. Frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital lobes. The frontal lobe controls important cognitive skills such as problem solving, emotional traits, reasoning or judgment, speaking, and voluntary motor activity. Again, the frontal lobes controls problem solving, emotional traits, reasoning or judgment, speaking, and voluntary motor activity. So it can be called the control panel of our personality and our ability to communicate. Okay, that's the first lobe. Second, the parietal lobe is located at the upper back in the skull, as you can see in the image. Okay? And it is responsible for our ability to know right from left. Okay? Also in processing sensory information, mainly on the sense of touch with the use of our hands and skin, taste with the use of our tongue, and temperature. All right. And also reading. Okay, so you can read there. Next, the temporal lobe is sitting close to our ear level within the skull. Okay, so it would be here, right? Okay. It is largely responsible for creating and preserving both conscious and long-term memory, in addition to processing sensory information from the ears. It also controls our behavior and ability to understand language. So it works together with the frontal lobe when it comes to language comprehension, language ability. Lastly, we have the occipital lobe, which you can see is way at the back of the brain. So it helps us with vision or sense of sight, and also with color perception. So if there is something wrong with this part of the brain, our eyesight and color awareness will be altered. Okay. Now, although those are the four lobes of the brain, we should not forget the brain stem. I mentioned the word earlier. Okay. The brain stem is the part which connects the brain to the spinal cord. That's why you call it brain stem. Okay, like a plant. And it greatly helps us with important body functions like breathing, regulating body temperature, digestion, alertness, and swallowing. Another addition is the cerebellum. Okay, as I said, we will be talking about this later. Okay, so the cerebellum is a Latin word which means little brain. Perhaps because it looks like a second brain, although it's smaller. You can see it is near the brainstem. Okay, from this image. It's like a part of the brainstem. But, okay, they have different functions. This part of the brain is responsible for coordinating voluntary movements or movements we can control. For example, walking, bending, raising our hands, and more. It also is responsible for a number of functions, including motor skills such as balance, coordination in posture. Balance, coordination, and posture. Okay, and that's it about the four lobes of our brain, including the cerebellum and the brainstem. Oh, anyway, the lobes together with the cerebellum and the brainstem's positions would look like this. So you can see the colors corresponding the name of that part or that lobe. Okay, and to recall the functions for each lobe, here they are. The frontal lobe's functions are there on problem solving, together with reasoning and emotional traits, and also in charge of our speaking ability, emotional traits, and in controlling voluntary movements. On the temporal lobe, okay, the temporal lobe helps us with language comprehension, behavior management, memory, and hearing. Next one on the parietal lobe, okay, distinguishing which is left from right, sensation or feeling, and reading ability. Lastly, the occipital lobe, okay, which is responsible for our sight and color perception. All right, done with that, let's move on to the last part of this lecture. So it's on brain development, or what we call cognitive development. So there's a thing which we call cognitive skills. These are, or this is set of skills that the brain uses to think, learn, read, remember, pay attention, and solve problems. How do these cognitive abilities develop, and in what order? That's what we will find out next. We will be using Piaget's stages of cognitive development to talk about brain development. Oh, and by the way, these stages start at birth. Stage 1 starts from birth until the age of 2. We call it sensory motor stage. So at birth, both motor and sensory systems of the brain are already up and functioning for a normal baby. Okay? All right, anyway, motor means movement and sensory means our senses. Okay, so during this phase, the child learns through using his senses and in moving objects. Okay? Using the senses and moving objects. That's why in this stage, the toddler will put anything in its mouth and would like to touch anything as well. It's their way of discovering things. Okay, the next stage is what we call the pre-operational stage, which happens when the child is 2 years old until he is 7 years old. So here they develop memory and imagination. They also begin to connect sensory information to physical action. However, they still do not comprehend reason and have a hard time understanding others' point of view. Okay. Moreover, during this stage, they use an object to represent something else. For instance, using a broom to represent a horse. Perhaps you've seen kids play like that. Or using a box as a boat or a box as a house. They have creative imagination. All right, moving on the third stage, which we call the concrete stage, happens between 7 years old to 11 years old. During this stage, the child becomes less egocentric and begins to understand that not everyone shares their thoughts, beliefs, or feelings. That's nice. Another characteristic developed in this stage is inductive logic or inductive reasoning. Inductive logic means using examples or observations to come up with a conclusion. Okay, again, inductive logic is using examples and observation to come up with a conclusion or an answer to something. Okay, an example of this is when a child notices that when he is near a cat or a dog and he gets runny nose and sneezes, he will come up with the conclusion that he is allergic to a cat or a dog. Okay. The last stage is formal operational stage. Formal operational stage. Here, thinking becomes much more sophisticated in advance. So kids can think about theoretical concepts and use logic to come up with creative solutions to problems. Skills such as logical thought, deductive reasoning, and systematic planning also emerge during this stage. So, okay, These stages are needed in dealing with higher, this is skills are needed in dealing with higher scientific and mathematical problems. All right, so those are the 4 cognitive development stages. So with these observations on brain development, we are able to understand children's intellectual growth. We can also see that children were not just passive receivers of knowledge. Instead, they continually investigate and experiment as they learn about how the world works. Nevertheless, we just uncovered a thin layer to matter of the brain with this lecture. That's why I hope you would read more about brain development, about our brain's functions. Okay, we need to know more about how the brain works to get its full benefit when teaching. All right, okay, so that's it for the first part of the lecture on brain-based teaching, or brain-based approach. So with this lecture on the brain functions and development, I hope you are ready to learn about brain-based learning next. Thank you for finishing this with me. See you in the next video.